On November 23, 1996, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 took off from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, headed for Nairobi, Kenya. What was meant to be a routine flight quickly turned into a nightmare when three hijackers managed to enter the cockpit and take control of the aircraft. The hijackers demanded that the plane be flown to Australia. When it became clear that the plane did not have enough fuel to make it there, they redirected the flight towards the Comoros Islands. The events that unfolded on that fateful day had a profound impact on the aviation industry and led to significant changes in airline security procedures and protocols. In this video, we'll delve into the story of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, the hijacking, passenger and crew resistance, crash aftermath investigations, and safety improvements. Make sure to keep watching until the end of this video so you know all about the facts which happened on that day. Takeoff and initial stages of the flight. It was a beautiful day in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as passengers boarded Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, excited to embark on their journey to Nairobi, Kenya. The plane was a routine flight and everything seemed normal as the crew prepared for takeoff. As the engines roared to life, the plane began to lift off the runway, soaring into the clear blue sky. However, the peaceful atmosphere was soon shattered as three hijackers suddenly appeared in the cockpit. The hijackers had managed to enter the cockpit undetected, and they were now in control of the plane. Panic spread throughout the cabin as passengers realized the gravity of the situation. The crew and passengers were terrified, not knowing what the hijackers had in store for them.
Near the front of the plane are concerned, but have no idea what's going on.
The situation was chaotic and fear gripped everyone on board. Demand for flight to Australia. As the passengers and crew members of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 tried to come to terms with the fact that their flight had been hijacked, the hijackers made their demands clear. They wanted the plane to be flown to Australia, a distance that the aircraft simply did not have the fuel to cover. As panic and tension rose in the cabin, the pilots tried to reason with the hijackers, explaining that it was impossible to reach Australia with the amount of fuel they had. But the hijackers were determined and their grip on the aircraft remained firm. With no other option, the pilots made the difficult decision to follow the hijackers' orders and began to fly in the direction of Australia. But as the minutes turned into hours, it became increasingly clear that they would not make it.
The plane has less than 30 minutes of fuel left.
The fuel was running dangerously low, and the pilots knew that they had to make a change of plans quickly. The hijackers then directed the pilots to fly towards the Comoros Islands, a group of small islands located in the Indian Ocean. It was a desperate move, but the pilots had no other choice. They had to conserve whatever fuel they had left in order to make it to the nearest possible destination. As the plane began to descend towards the Comoros Islands, the passengers and crew members held their breath, hoping against hope that they would make it to safety. But tragically, their hopes were dashed as the plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. The impact was devastating, and the survivors were left to struggle for their lives in the open sea. Passengers and crew react as the hijacking unfolded. As the hijacking of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 unfolded, panic and chaos quickly set in among the passengers and crew members.
Situation like that, it would be Mo talking to the hijackers.
The realization that their lives were now in the hands of dangerous hijackers was a terrifying one. However, in the face of this terror, some of the passengers and crew members decided to take matters into their own hands. They began to work together to try and overpower the hijackers and regain control of the aircraft. But the hijackers were not going to give up without a fight. They responded with violence, brandishing knives and threatening to kill anyone who got in their way. In the midst of this struggle, at least one passenger was stabbed, adding to the already tense situation. Despite the danger they faced, the passengers and crew members continued to resist the hijackers with all their might.
Outside in the window,
They used whatever they could find as makeshift weapons, including seat belts and food trays, to try and subdue the hijackers. But the hijackers were determined to maintain control of the aircraft. They held firm, using the threat of violence to intimidate the passengers and crew members. Crash into the Indian Ocean as the plane approached the Comoros Islands. As Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 approached the Comoros Islands, a sense of fear and panic began to grip the passengers and crew members. Suddenly, the engine started to sputter and cough, and the plane began to lose altitude rapidly. The pilots realized that they were running out of fuel, and they were forced to make an emergency landing in the ocean. The impact of the crash was brutal, and the plane broke apart upon impact with the water. The survivors were left struggling for survival in the open ocean as they desperately clung to any debris they could find. The water was cold, and the waves were rough, making it even harder for them to stay afloat.
I never thought anything would like that happen in my life.
Despite the harrowing circumstances, some passengers managed to keep their spirits up and continue fighting for survival. They huddled together, sharing what little food and water they had and trying to keep each other warm. Meanwhile, rescue teams were dispatched to the area to search for any signs of life. The aftermath of the crash was devastating. 125 of the 175 people on board lost their lives, leaving families and loved ones shattered by the loss. The survivors were left with physical and emotional scars that would last a lifetime. Search and rescue efforts in the aftermath of the crash. After the devastating crash of Flight 961, search and rescue teams were deployed to find any survivors. They combed the vast and remote Indian Ocean, searching for any signs of life amidst the wreckage. Despite their best efforts, the search and rescue teams faced difficult conditions. The crash site was far from any land and the waters were treacherous. The survivors who had managed to escape the wreckage were left to battle against the elements. As the night fell, hope began to fade. Many of the survivors who had managed to cling onto wreckage did not survive the night. The search and rescue teams were heartbroken as they continued their search for any remaining survivors. Despite the challenges, the search and rescue teams persisted in their efforts. They scoured the ocean for days, searching for any signs of life amidst the wreckage. Their determination paid off when they discovered a group of survivors who had managed to stay afloat on a piece of debris. The survivors were brought to safety, but the tragedy of the crash weighed heavily on all those involved. Investigation and fallout in the months and years following the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 hijacking. After the incident happened, investigators worked tirelessly to determine the root cause of the tragedy. They scoured through the wreckage and interviewed survivors and witnesses to piece together the events that led up to the crash. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the hijacking was a result of a major breach in airline security.
Make it. No, we should be able to. I know you'll make it. I was talking to it.
The fact that 3 hijackers were able to enter the cockpit and take control of the aircraft was a grave failure of the security systems in place. The findings of the investigation led to a massive overhaul of airline security procedures and protocols. Airlines and airports implemented more strict security checks, including more thorough screening of passengers and luggage. They also introduced new technologies such as biometric identification systems and enhanced surveillance to improve the safety of air travel. In addition, the training of pilots and flight crew members was revamped to include more comprehensive emergency response training. They were trained to handle hijacking situations and other emergency scenarios so that they could respond quickly and efficiently in the face of danger. These changes in airline security procedures and training have since become standard practices in the aviation industry, making air travel safer for everyone involved. While the loss of life on Flight 961 was tragic and devastating, it prompted necessary changes to be made to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. As we come to the end of this video, we can't help but wonder, what would have happened if the hijackers had not been able to enter the cockpit and take control of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961? Would the outcome have been different? And what more can we do to ensure the safety and security of air travel in the future? We may never know the answers to these questions, but what we do know is that the events of that day had a lasting impact on the aviation industry. It sparked major changes in airline security protocols and procedures, and it serves as a reminder of the importance of constant vigilance when it comes to the safety of air travel. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel for more compelling stories from history.